Hey guys, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about item hunting, item finding now. This is kind of the second part of the item and itemization video. So let's start talking about how you go about acquiring items in Diablo 2. So in Diablo 2, at the end game and even the middle of the game, you usually need to find better and better items to progress through the game. There are a few characters that can actually play through the game naked and beat it, but for the most part, Diablo is about collecting items, upgrading your gear, and eventually being so powerful that nothing kind of stands in your way. And eventually there's certain builds that can get that way in player PVM, which is called player versus monster, and you can get that way where you're basically blasting through the game at as high speed as possible. That's a lot of people's goal in this game, is to kind of get the most efficient character that kills the fastest, as well as collecting items that are good for PvP with player versus player and fighting other players. I'm not going to stay too heavy on that, but really I'm going to talk about how do you go about collecting these type of items. How do you go through and end up with, you know, a giant stash just filled to the brim with just stuff, set items. You know, I've got tons of set items here. How did I go collect all these things, and what's the most efficient way? Now, you don't I want to get away from efficiency a little bit, and kind of do a preface here. Diablo 2 should not be a game purely about efficiency. That's how you burn out of any game. If you math it to death, it's going to get super frustrating and boring. The main goal of the game is to kill stuff and have fun doing it. So if you're not having fun and you're being too efficient, take a step back for a second and remember that you're playing a game. Have fun with it. Change up your build. Play something wacky. That's also what this game's about. But in order to do that, a lot of times you want to collect items that you can use to make your wacky builds and have fun and do all these unique things. So the most efficient way, now we'll go back to efficiency, if you do want to focus a little bit on efficiency, is by creating a character or a certain build that uses what's called Magic Find. And Magic Find is a attribute on certain items that is basically, so on the Oculus here you notice this one, because of an Istrune in it, it's got 80% chance, or 80% better chance of getting magic items. So what that does is it actually increases the chances that an item that drops will be a magic item, or a rare, or a unique, or a set item. And it actually varies a little bit depending on how much that increases for each type. So there is diminishing returns on it, so you don't want to have too much Magic Find, but there's kind of a balancing act that you want to have between enough gear to have like make your character more powerful, and also give you a better chance to find these magic items. So if you were to have no Magic Find on your character, a lot of items that would drop would just be standard quality white or socketed items. And so it's be a lot more rare that these magic, unique, set magic items are still fairly common. Rare items are still fairly common, but uniques and set items are a lot less common if you don't have any Magic Find gear. So in this case, I have a lot of Magic Find gear. Sorceresses are very good at stacking Magic Find and still being good killers and efficient killers. So generally people think, at least in the modest gear spectrum, when you don't have all the high-end gear, Sorceress is probably one of the most efficient ways to Magic Find in the game. So that's why a lot of people use it, and mostly that's because of being able to be powerful without too much crazy gear, and also having the ability to teleport, which makes your magic finding and killing monsters a lot faster because your travel time is a lot less. So that said, let's talk a little bit about how the Magic Find actually works and do a little bit of the math here. Might be a little bit boring, but so let's start with Magic Find itself. So for example, if you have no Magic Find, then the game has a specific amount of rarity of each of the types of items. Certain types of items will only drop, you say I want to find a unique set of gloves, and those will only drop once out of every 5,000 times you kill a certain boss. All right, each type of monster has a different drop chance for each type of item, and then that item has a different chance to roll as a unique or as a set or as a rare, any of that kind of stuff. It's a little more complex than that. You can do a lot of reading online about it, but that's the basic gist of it. So by increasing your magic find, you can actually increase the chance that those items are going to be magic, rare, set, and unique. So with 25 magic find, your chance to find unique items actually increases by 22%. Set items chance increases by 23%, rare items by 24%, and magic items by 25%. That's with 25% magic find. So, that said, that's pretty straight line across, almost a 25% increase on everything. But the further you go, there's diminishing returns. Now, magic items always have the same amount as your MF. So if you had 100% MF, you'd find 100%. You'd have 100% better chance of finding magic items. That said, you'd only have a 71% chance of finding unique items better. So it's got a little bit heavier of a diminishing return on uniques and set items. Sets get 83% more when you have 100% magic find. So the area that it really starts to drop off is about 200 to 300 magic find. So at a 200% magic find, you only get 111% better chance to get unique items. Now, if you bump that up to 300 magic find, you only have 136% chance to find, or more chance to find a unique item. So between 200 and 300 magic find percentage on your gear, that's only giving you really a 25% increase in chance to find more unique items. And uniques and sets are really what you're going for the most part when you're magic finding. So, the higher you get there, the less and less you get out of rare sets and uniques. So it isn't worth sacrificing killing speed and damage abilities on your gear to go much higher than that. Now that's all a balancing act. I wouldn't say to stack 200 or 300 MF on any particular character. It all goes back to your gear. And so it's not an easy answer with how much to use. For example, this character, let's see, we can check the MF. This is only something on Pluggy mod here, but I have a 357% better chance of getting magic items. Now, that's a lot of magic find, but I'm not really sacrificing much of my gear that would make me not kill. But I couldn't really add much more to make me kill faster. I'm at the correct fast cast breakpoint where I'm casting really fast. All of my gear is giving plus skills to kill quicker, and there's not really any piece of gear that I'm sacrificing. I have max resistances, even a little extra cold resist because of this belt, I believe. But I really at the peak point where I'm not sacrificing any damage abilities to add MF. I'm just stacking magic find completely as the gravy items. Anything that I don't have a slot for that could increase damage, well then that's the place I'm adding MF items. So that's just something you want to think of, kind of create a balancing act. And certain classes might need more, they might be more gear dependent. So you might, on a necromancer, you might say, well, he doesn't need that much gear if he's running an army of skeletons, I can stack a ton of MF. When on a barbarian, you're not going to have as much MF because all your melee gear needs to be good to be able to even kill efficiently. So that's kind of how that works. That's the basics of MF. And when I say MF, I mean percentage better chance of getting magic items, magic finding. So the next thing I'm going to get into is different areas to run in the game and the different types of items that you expect to find. So the classic way that magic finding was done in Diablo 2 was killing act bosses, okay? So each act has a major boss. Andariel in Act 1, Duriel in Act 2, Mephisto in Act 3, Diablo in Act 4, and Baal in Act 5. So killing these act bosses and some of the mini bosses, including like Eldritch up here in the Frigid Highlands, or Shank the Overseer. Pindleskin was a really good one. Nilithok. Who else? The Travankel's a good one. The High Council guys here. What's her name? The Countess here in the Black Marsh is a really good one. She drops a lot of runes. So that's killing act bosses. So let's talk about that for an example. Act bosses are guaranteed to drop a certain amount of special items, let's say. So like Andariel here, she's pretty likely to drop a few good items, as well as there's this thing called quest bugging, which I can talk about at a later time, which makes you get quest drops off her every time. She's got this special bugged quest or quest item bug that happens. It's even in online and everything. But basically, when you kill an act boss, you're guaranteed to get a certain amount of good items. So we got a unique ring here, so hopefully we get something good. Andariel's good because she drops a lot of rings and amulets and jewelry. So we got a Ravenfrost, and it's actually a pretty good one. 194 AR and 18 Dexterity. Those are the variable mods on it. It's a pretty good Ravenfrost ring. So again, that's a good one. Act boss, she's pretty easy. She has a negative fire resistance, so if you're a fire sorceress or a class that uses fire druid, she's a really good class to, or a person to run. Let's move on. Duriel is okay. He's kind of difficult depending on the class you are. I don't really run him that much, but some people do. For a sorceress, the Durance of Hate is also a really great place to run. So let's go run that one. So there's a special thing you could do in the Durance of Hate with a caster class, or someone that can shoot, or doesn't have to be melee. It's called river tricking Mephisto. So we can get up to Mephisto here, and you want to pull him over to one of the arms of the thing. Look, it's shaped like a little man on the map. But you teleport across the river here. That's why it's called the river trick. And Mephisto, if you get far enough away like this, he can't touch you at all. But you can free cast on him. So you use an ability like Blizzard or Meteor or even Lightning, anything you can just cast across with. And he can't touch you. You can cast on him and easily kill him and not ever worry about getting hurt. So this is a great thing to farm as a sorceress, or any class, if you can teleport across and cast on them, which you can do with like a teleport staff that you can shop, or a thing with charges that teleport on it. But you can do that, be totally safe. It's something that's great to do when you have almost no gear. So at the start of a ladder, that's a really good technique. Diablo and Baal a little bit harder to farm unless you can clear the chaos or clear the Baal runs by yourself, but they're both going to give you some pretty good items as well. Same thing with all act bosses. They've got a good chance to drop like at least a handful of magic or better items, and a pretty good chance to drop higher end gear. Now, the different act bosses have different treasure classes. This also goes for just regular mobs too. There's different things called treasure classes. Treasure classes are basically a classification of certain types of items that can drop in various areas of mob and monster level. So the higher treasure class areas are where the monsters are higher level and harder to kill. So the highest treasure class in the game is treasure class 87, and that's all the super rare uniques and set items are all from that treasure class. And so there's a few of these areas in the game. The main ones being the pits in Act 1, the ancient tunnels in Act 2, there's a couple areas, the sewers, and a few in Act 3. They're not farmed very often because the monster density is really low. Chaos in Act 4, and the Chaos Sanctuary and River of Flame, which running Diablo basically in Act 4. And then the World Stone Keep in Act 5. And level 2 and 3 in the World Stone Keep and the Throne of Destruction. All those areas can drop any item in the game, and almost all the mobs can drop any item in the game. As well as killing Diablo, Baal, and Nilithok they can also drop. Those three bosses, Diablo, Baal, and Nilithok, can drop any item in the game as well. So those are the places you want to farm if you're looking for Tyrael's Might, if you're looking for Death's Fathom, if you're looking for any of the super high level uniques, or rares or sets or any of that kind of stuff. So that said, out of the way, certain classes, instead of running boss running like we're doing with sorcerers here, will want to run those areas, and that's called area clearing. So those classes, you'll want to have something that can kill really fast in those areas. For the pits, good pit clearers are Meteor Sork is pretty decent at it, which is a hybrid of fire and ice. So you can run a sorcerer with that. She can teleport, which is nice. Javazons aren't too bad at it. Necromancers are great at it. The fastest clear in the game for pits is actually a Poison Nova Necromancer with all the good gear, but that takes a long time to get. But Summons Necromancer with Corpse Explosion is very good at that. A Trap Assassin is very good at that as well. Wind Druid's not too bad. And then we got the Ancient Tunnels, which is one of my favorites for Blizzard Sork. Everyone should know about this if they play Blizzard Sork. This is none of these mobs are inherently cold immune in here, and it's a treasure class 87 area, so you can just come in here, cast some blizzards, and these guys can drop any item in the game. You get a Zod Rune, you can get a Tyrael's Might, and any item, so it's a crapshoot. But there's a lot of experience here because of this, but there's also, it is dangerous because it's a high level 85, the high area. All the monsters are level 85 or higher, but the treasure class is very good. So that's just something to think about. There's a lot of high monster density, as you can tell, and these guys can drop some really good shit. So that's the area you would go in Act 2. For the Chaos Sanctuary, sorceresses are good there, but you really want a lightning sorceress at that point. Blizzard Sorks can do it, but more on lower player settings, and there's a way to run it called seal glitching, or it's the seal trick, and I can go into that in a later episode, but that's a way for Blizzard Sorceress to run it pretty fast. You can also do the left side of Chaos only, which has a lot less of, which is the north seal, or the left side if you're going up northeast, I guess, would be kind of the left side here on the map. And so that's reasonable for a Blizzard Sork. But Hammerdins are very good there. Again, Summons Necromancers are good there, but they're not that great at killing Diablo at the end. Lightning Sorceresses are great there. Trapsons are great there. Javazons are great there once they have Infinity. And then you have the Worldstone Keep in Act 5. And Necromancers are great at the Worldstone Keep. Trapsons are great at the Worldstone Keep. Druids are actually pretty good at the Worldstone Keep. They're good at Chaos as well, Wind Druids. Hammerdins are decent there. They have trouble killing the Bale Waves, Wave 2 in particular. If you use Holy Bolt, I think it is, and you're Mercenary, you can actually fairly effectively do it. And then, yeah, quite a few of the classes in the game. Now, the one I haven't really talked about so much yet is the Barbarian. He's a little bit unique. He's kind of stuck to a few specific areas, but that's because he's melee pretty much for the most part, and it's very hard, and he's very gear dependent. So if you want to MF with him, there's specific ways to find runes and things like that with him, but he's not as good at area clearing, so that's why I left him out of this discussion. So that's the way to area clear. That will find you some of the highest level uniques in the game. If you clear those areas very fast, they can drop a lot of runes. The more monsters you kill, the more chance you have to drop runes. Oh, I almost forgot the most one of the most awesome areas to find. It's the secret cow level for Amazons. Javelin Amazons especially are extremely good at that. As well as summon necromancers, the corpse explosion, and what's the other class? The assassin with corpse explosion trap, essentially the death sentry. So those three classes are great at the cow level. And the cow level, in particular, cows drop runes a lot more than other places. And Javelin Amazons tend to run a little bit lower MF than other classes. So they tend to be good rune finders and socketed item finders and white item finders. So they're good for finding rune word bases as well in the cow level. So now that we've got area clearing, those can find a lot of items, but now we're going to talk about rune hunting, because runes are the bread and butter of getting a powerful character in Diablo 2. Almost every character can benefit from some sort of rune word, and the holy grail basically of rune words in this game is the Enigma rune word. It's use a Jaw and a Burr rune, and an Ith as well, but Ith's very easy to come across. But Jaw and Burr runes are two of the highest runes in the game. If you put Jaw, Ith, Burr into an armor, it gives 1 to teleport for any class, regardless if you're a sorceress. You wouldn't use it that often as a sorceress, or you could, but it'd be a little bit of a waste. But you can use that armor on, say, a necromancer or a druid, and you can be teleporting around with a druid or a necromancer, which means if you're a necromancer with a giant army, you can be teleporting around with a giant army, which is totally awesome. So, in order to find a Jaw and a Burr, which is pretty tough, especially in single player, I actually have not done it yet. I have a Burr rune here, so I've got half, or one of the hard ones to get, so let me show you that here, just for fun to brag. Where is it? 50, here we go. Here's a bunch of the higher runes I've collected. There's the Burr rune. I've got some Gulls, Ists, Mals. So these are mid runes that are fairly valuable. Saving them so if I need to cube them up, I can. But I've made a call to arms, so I've found an Ohm rune. I have a Heart of the Oak somewhere with a Vex rune in it. I have a what do you call it? It's the Grief with a low rune in it. So I've collected quite a few high runes and have some powerful rune words. But that's really what you're going to be hunting for when you're hunting for runes. You're hunting for these high runes. You've got an extremely low chance to drop. And so you want to farm areas that have high monster density, like the cows level, or chaos, or the pits, or any of these areas where there's a lot of monsters, and you want to kill them fast. Or you want to find areas like the Travancore, who can drop a mix of runes, and the Travancore mobs actually have a very high chance to drop runes. I see a rune almost every run against the Travancore here when I have it on players 3. I'm not sure if I would say on players 3 here in single player. But yeah, I find them a lot here in Travancore. So I would just go kill. That's about as fast as my Traverns are for the most part. You just get a couple casts and they're dead, and you teleport back, and that's the end of my run. It's super quick. So those are very good, on par or similar to cows for single player. You can also do this run called the Lower Kurast. I don't really have a good map for it now, but we'll show you how this works. So you want to look in Lower Kurast. The reason you run this for high runes is they've got these special chests here called super chests, and here's one. So we're looking for this little campfire thing. Lower Kurast can have 1 or 2 of these campfires, okay? So when you find this campfire, there's always going to be a building right here with 1 and 2 chests, and then another one right here with a chest and a weapon rack, okay? So you might have 2 of these campfires, so a total of 6 chests, or you might have only 3 chests in a game. In single player, you'll want to try to roll a map where you have 6 of them all, or two campfires, but 6 chests close together, and you continuously farm them. The reason you want to hit these chests is everything in Diablo 2, as far as drops, are dropped completely randomly. So there's a random chance that something will come up, except these chests in the Lower Kurast. I don't know why they did this, but these chests are actually have preset loot in them, and they're seeded, which means each chest has an assigned number, and there's about 55,000 different seeds that are in this. And so in these 55,000 seeds, there's a pretty significant amount of them that have high runes in them. So it's a pretty great place to farm high runes. And knowing that there's a limited number of seeds, you'll know that, you know, there's a limit on how many runes are going to drop. Still random. It'll pick a random number in that seed, but they're going to always drop a good amount of stuff. But, for example, when this seed comes up, it's always going to drop this. It's always going to drop a super healing potion, a greater healing potion, a small charm, a field plate, a shark skin belt. It'll always drop this stuff. So when there's a seed that has a Burr rune in it, and people have known by going and looking in the code, there's a certain amount of seeds for each of the chests. You've got a pretty good chance of finding a high rune, better than, I know 55,000 or whatever it is seems pretty low, but the amount of normal drop rate it is to find high rune is probably significantly less than that. So it's a great place to run. Doesn't seem like this one has 2 campfires. Maybe it does. Look a little bit further. So that's that. It's not as good maybe to run online because the maps change constantly, but if you do run it online, be sure to kick all these hollow logs and these other chests. I mean, you don't have to do them all, but if you're running by it, especially if your class is not teleporting, kick them, because there's a lot of stuff you can find in the regular chests, not just the super chests. So that's a really good a way to rune find, especially good with a sorceress with no gear, because you don't have to kill anything. You just have to hit chests and leave the game. So that's one of the best ways. Travancore, like I said, is arguably my favorite way and the best way, because as a sorceress, I'll do a few of these runs while we're talking. As a sorceress, you can do these runs ridiculously fast, and as a hammered in and as a barbarian, you can do these runs really fast. And all you have to do is run over to these guys here, kill them. I have a map that's good where they almost always spawn all inside of here, which makes it really easy to just throw blizzards over the top. As a blizzard sorceress, I ignore this guy because he's just a bitch and he's cold immune. But he's the only one that's cold immune. And then I teleport back, I go to Pandemonium Fortress, and I leave the game. And if you do a pretty quick run like that, we'll check out the time. So let's start it here. Look at the time on the video right now. So now, that was about 35 seconds, give or take. You can run a lot of those runs very fast. Now, when I've got into my groove of doing it on this pretty geared Blizzard Sword, I can do them in about 22, 23 seconds for the most part. Sometimes they're longer if they're spread out a little bit like the last one, but sometimes you can do them ridiculously fast. So that's one of the good ways to rune find. I like Travancore in particular because they don't just drop runes. Lower Crest pretty much just drops runes, charms, and jewels. So you're only really going to be finding that. You don't have a chance to drop a really good rare item or unique item. Like for example, Oculus. You know, this Viper Magi. Let's see. Does it say item level? Here's a good example. I guess these are 85 item levels. Some of the stuff is, well, some of the stuff I found there, maybe it is an eye level 85 area. Let me take a look and see. But a lot of this stuff is, yeah, actually I think it is an eye level 85 here. Let's see. Maybe it's 80. Let's pick up an item here. Good chunk of my charms and stuff have come from this area. So yeah, they are eye level 85. So that just shows you eye level 85 Shaco, eye level 85 Mara's Kaleidoscope. Almost all these items that I found that are item level 85, they came from the Hell Travancore. So I found a lot of this gear in the Travancore here. Not the Monarch, but the Skeets, Look at all these charms. A bunch of these. Well, 80, that's probably from the high level 80 stuff comes from the doing lower crest. But a lot of these came from this Travancore area. So running this really drops a lot of jewels. I think it's the best place in the game to find rainbow facets, which are the unique jewels, which are really powerful. And it's just got a good mix of all of it. It can drop up to Cham Rune, so you can get the second highest rune in the game. No Zod, sorry, you're going to have to run cows for that. But it drops Chams so frequently that if you're running these pretty fast, you can probably cube 2 Chams into a Zod rune quicker than you can find it in cows, at least on single player. So, that said, a lot of this MFing I've been talking about has been about single player. There's a little bit of differences when you go to multiplayer games, so let's talk about that for a second. Multiplayer games are kind of different. There's three types of multiplayer. One is TCP/IP, which is direct connecting with your friends playing your single player characters. I'm not talking about that. That's if you're playing with one other buddy, it's very similar to single player. But if we are playing on Battle.net, there's this little cutesy thing called Realm Down. If you played Battle.net before, you probably know what that is. And that's if you make too many games within an hour, it's going to lock you out of Diablo 2 for a significant period of time. Which, if you're trying to play a game and have fun, you don't want to get locked out from playing the game. I don't know why they made this. I think it was to stop spam bots or when people started botting the game for runes and running those Pindle bots. I think it was a way to just try to battle those things. But it makes it so those Travancore runs I was talking to you about that were 20 seconds, well, it's something like if you make more than 20 or 25 games an hour, then it'll lock you out. Doing 20, 30-second Trav runs is going to lock you out really fast. So it's not as good to do on Battle.net. So what people like to do on Battle.net is get a character that's good at running a lot of things. Blizzard Sork is a good class to do that early in the game because you can run Andariel and then run Mephisto and then run the Ancient Tunnels and then run the Travancore and then maybe do some Chaos or run some of the key bosses, anything in between. All those type of things you can do in the same game and then make a new game. So you're kind of adding more variety to your run and you're making sure you're avoiding that Realm Down. One other place I forgot to talk about, and Blizzard Sork's not necessarily the best character to run this, but we can go check it out, does this guy have his gear on? No, he doesn't. Put some gear on this guy really fast. Get a V-gaze. Put a Duriel shell's fine.
I'll put that to good use.
And let's get him a weapon. Do I have a pole arm that he can use? Yeah, here's an insight. Alright, so let's do this here. So the Black Marsh is an area, and you can run the Countess. It's also a rune finding area, but the problem with running the Countess, it is a very good place to run to find runes, particularly in the lower difficulties, normal and nightmare. You can collect a lot of lower runes here, which is really good if you want to make those lower end rune words like Spirit and Insight, and a lot of these rune words that are very powerful early game. Smoke, Stealth, any of this kind of stuff. I don't know for the whole we're looking for where is it? Here we go. So this Forgotten Tower. So we're going to teleport through the Forgotten Tower for a minute. Try to find Forgotten Tower level 5. And the reason we're doing this is the Countess has a special rune drop rate. She always drops at least one rune when you kill her. I think if you actually kill her in a one-player game, you have more higher rune chance to drop more runes. In a higher player count, she's more likely to drop items, which she doesn't drop that good of items anyway. So you want to make sure that you're killing her in a low player setting. So I will single player here real quick. I will switch my settings to players 1. But on Battle.net, you won't have to worry about this. You know, you'll probably be MFing in one-player games regardless. But here we go. We will do Countess here. One player. When I can find the last one. Okay. So Countess is a little bit hard as a Blizzard Sork because she's usually immune, and a lot of her mobs are immune to cold. But if you're Good at what you do. Let your Merc do some killing. My Merc just killed him. And there you go. I got a Lem Rune, which is actually a pretty good mid rune. It's actually not too bad from the Countess. So the Countess can drop, she has a special rune drop rate, and she drops these runes at a lot better rate, all the way up to an Ist rune. So that's where it kind of gets shaky. Ist runes are pretty powerful, but they're not high runes. They're not on that level. In Battle.net, you can trade Ist runes for things like, when it gets later in the ladder, you can trade them for maybe like a Shaco, or I don't know, well, probably not a, probably you can get more than a Viper Magi. Maybe you can get a Geeds, or an Oculus for an Ist, or maybe you can get, I don't know the prices on Battle.net, I haven't played in a while, but it's those type of things. You can get the good quality uniques, but not the super high-end uniques with those runes up to Ist. But it's good for currency runes and trading. So that's definitely a place that's worth farming, especially if you can't kill much else. It's actually very good for a Lightning Sork if you don't have Infinity. Running that on Lightning Sork, there's a few other classes that are pretty good at running it, but particularly you want Teleport for that, especially online play, because try running through that giant labyrinth of the tower cellar levels without Teleport is pretty awful. So that's a good place. Now I'm going to talk about Slash Diablo. Now, Slash Diablo I haven't really mentioned much about, but a lot of the guys that are watching these videos are playing on Slash Diablo. I am not one of the creators of Slash Diablo. I'm not affiliated with it, but I've played on it a little bit, so I'm going to talk about it. Slash Diablo is a private server. That's some guys from Reddit, if you've heard of Reddit before, started hosting. Just a group of guys that love to play Diablo 2. There's a few things that are different from Battle.net and Slash Diablo. One, it's a private server, so it's not hosted through the Battle.net servers. You're playing with a separate group of guys. Usually each ladder brings, 100, 200 players to it, and a lot of guys, probably 50, 60, 70, maybe even 100, play through the later ends of the ladders. I think they have a ladder reset about every 6 months, or maybe it's every 4 months. I can't remember, something like that. But the main difference between Slash Diablo and the regular Battle.net is there's a couple things. One is that every Stone of Jordan sold in the game spawns Uber Diablo, which gives you the Annihilus charm here if you kill him, or Diablo clone, sorry, not Uber Diablo. So that's one of the differences. The other main difference is that the no drop chance in Slash Diablo is 0. So every mob is going to drop an item, regardless of what it may not be a good item, but they're going to drop something, which means that it's more effective MFing on Slash Diablo by killing a shitload of monsters, regardless of what you're doing. So cow runs, farming the pits, all those areas, that's almost always going to be your best bet in Slash Diablo. On single player and on Battle.net, player settings make a difference. So the more players that's in a game, the harder the monsters are, but the more loot they'll drop. And even at a player's 8 setting, it still has not a no drop setting of 0. It's like 5% or something to not drop an item in player's 8. But in player's 1, it's pretty high. It's like there's like a 50 or 60% chance for a monster not to drop an item. So on Slash Diablo, since every mob will drop an item guaranteed, more items drop. So just make sure you keep that in mind when you're killing things on that server. It's a very fun server. The loot is actually fairly balanced. I think it's a pretty good mix of how the D2 legitimate servers or the normal Battle.net servers do it. Some in single player, it's so hard to find gear in Diablo 2 sometimes. It's just a different way to play. It's a little more fun, a little more rapid increase. It's not anywhere near souped up drops where people are just constantly finding good stuff, but it just makes it a little bit more common. The other thing about Slash Diablo is the mods are very good at removing people who bot. So the economy is actually a true economy, and doesn't, for the most part, doesn't use bots, and the ones that do get banned pretty fast from the server. So that's kind of cool. Battle.net's bots are rampant if you haven't been on there lately, so it's why a lot of people end up playing single player like I do a lot of. But I play Slash Diablo when I want to play with friends, and it's a little bit of a different experience, but it's really fun. Not to talk down on anything on Slash Diablo. It's a great set of guys. They all just love Diablo 2, and that's just how they have fun playing the game. So check it out if you haven't. It's a pretty cool server. Um, and if not, no big deal. No sweat off my back. But yeah, that's the difference between those. The main things are in Battle.net, make sure you are paying attention to how long your games are. / Diablo, they do not have that realm down feature, so you can make as many games as you want, as fast as you want. Just make sure you're not using a bot, and you're fine there. Single player, I think Travancore is the best place to find runes. / Diablo, it's probably cows or lower Carest. And in Battle.net, it's just area clears, and you need to be cows probably one of the best as well because the runs take a little longer and you're less chance to get realm down. But that said, all those areas are viable. You can do a giant run with everything in it if you want. But that's how to find items in Diablo 2. So there's a lot more that goes into it. We will have some podcasts where we talk about this more, but that's the gist of finding items. I hope you learned something. If you didn't, tell me I'm stupid and they're useless. Leave a comment, something like that. If you learned something, I'd enjoy to hear what you learned, what was new. If you thought I did something wrong, tell me about it. Maybe I'll put a correction in there if there's something I said wrong. I'm not a genius. I haven't gotten everything. But if you liked it and you're interested in it, if you're interested in the podcast when that comes out or have any ideas for the podcast, let me know. Leave me a comment, send me a message on Reddit if you see my posts on Reddit. And thanks for watching. Have a good one, guys.